I have some friends that are studying this issue, ordination, with me. And one of them asked me today about 1 Timothy chapter 3. You know about that chapter. That's the one that says that an elder should be the husband of one wife and says that he should rule his home well. Well, this person that asked me, what about some other things in that chapter? The elder should be blameless. The elder should be apt to teach. The elder, well, what if he's a widower? What if he's never had children? What if he's not married at all? He was asking me, can we really take this text to an extreme? Can we really make it an absolute? Isn't there some room there to sometimes have an elder that isn't apt to teach, to have an elder who may not be married or who is a widower? Isn't it possible that what he was really trying to say is that these qualifications for elders are ideals that shouldn't be taken as absolutes? I want to talk about that for a minute. Is it up to us as individuals to decide which issues in the Bible are absolute and which ones have room for decision-making and subjective evaluation? Is that up to us or churches, or has God given us a way to figure it out? Think about something you are familiar with. Is it wrong to work as a plumber on the Sabbath? You would say yes, so would I. And if a plumber determined to work on the Sabbath, we would say that he should be disfellowshipped for this sin. But what about if someone is talking at potluck about their upcoming opportunities in the job market? I think that that's not holy conversation. That's not the way to talk on Sabbath. But do we discipline people for their conversation on Sabbath? Or let me even go further. The 10th commandment says, thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house or thy neighbor's wife. And if it was written today, it might even say thy neighbor's car. But can we remove someone from church fellowship or discipline them for coveting? The Sabbath and coveting they're both part of the 10 commandments. Why do we make a difference? Let me help you with this. It's not guesswork. It's because the issue of working on Sabbath, like the issue of committing adultery, is an issue of open, obvious sin. It's an issue of sin that anyone can see. It's not an accident. You can't see when a man is lusting in his mind, but you can see when he's left his wife for a girlfriend. And it's because these issues are open and distinct that we make them issues of church discipline. Now let's come back to 1 Timothy chapter 3. When we ask, is a man blameless? You know, that's not a really easy thing to evaluate. When we ask, are his children in good control? Does he have a well-ordered household? Even that issue of an ordered household is not, the edges on that are blurry. I'll give you my take on it. I think that I'm responsible for my children only as long as I have authority to discipline them. And when they have authority to make their own decisions, they become responsible for their own decisions. So as an elder, my children should be under godly control while I'm making the decisions for them. But when they begin to make their own decisions, then they have their own responsibility. Nevertheless, that isn't stated plainly in the passage, and we have maybe a room for subjective interpretation about whether a man is guiding his home well. But when you take the verses before 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul says that he does not permit a woman to teach nor to usurp authority over a man. This is not out of the blue. The verse just before it says that a woman should learn in quietness. In other words, there's an issue between this business of authoritative teaching and the issue of a woman being forbidden from that position. That is just before Paul explains why. And when he explains why, it's all about Genesis. It's about the fall of Eve and about the creation of Eve. It's about what happened there with Adam. The very next verse after that 4-verse passage is when Paul says, if a man desires the office of an overseer, he desires a good thing. Let me try to make this plain for you. It's the Bible in 1 Timothy 2 and 3 that makes the issue of gender a non-negotiable issue. It's the Bible that says it must not be and I do not permit. Then when you come to 1 Timothy 3 itself, and where it says that the elder must be the husband of one wife, that issue of a husband of one wife, it's not hard to see whether or not a man has 2 wives or 3 wives. That's not a secret issue, whether he is a serial polygamist and leaves one woman to marry another and does it over and over. Those are not private things. They're out in the open. So when we take 1 Timothy chapter 3, the elder should be the husband of one wife, that's not a private issue. It's not a subjective one. It's one that the church can see. It's not a verse that forbids a man to be single or forbids a widower or forbids someone whose children are grown. Quite in the contrary, it's a verse that forbids an open violation of the 7th commandment. Serial polygamy or having multiple wives at one time, either one of those is forbidden. And if anyone has those issues, he's not qualified to be an elder of God's church. Why do we take that one verse and put it, as it were, a pedestal for all the world church when some of those other things must be left to congregations to evaluate? It's because the Bible says that I do not permit a woman to have that position. It's because of the Bible that we make tests. And when the Bible doesn't establish the test, we are authorized to establish it ourselves. Maybe you remember in Adventist history, you can read about this in the first volume of the Testimonies, that Stephen Haskell decided that eating pork should be a test of fellowship in his church. Do you know Ellen White wrote him and rebuked him? She didn't rebuke him for his position on pork. She didn't rebuke him for his position on it being a test of fellowship, but she did rebuke him for making it a private test. She indicated that when God makes a test, he makes a test for the entire denomination. So when God establishes a test for elders, that's not a private test for one division or another, for one group of churches or another. Tests are established for us as a body, so as a body we can be united. Again, there are issues that are personal. How much food I choose to eat, to what extent I practice modesty, these things can never be defined with precision. There's just too much that needs to be left for thinking and reason of the individual believer. But when it comes to church order and organization, God doesn't leave that to individual churches. We would call that congregationalism. When it comes to church order, God has established the principles for us. That's what he does in 1 Timothy chapter 2 and 3. And that's why we must oppose the ordination of women, not as an issue of individual liberty, but as an issue of church unity. We must be united in the issues of discipline so that we are one structure, so that we don't become national churches. Discipline can never be an issue where various parents take different positions. If they do, it's going to produce rebellion. And if on this issue we allow different parts of the church to take different positions, you know what it's going to do for the members? It's going to produce a never-ending set of arguments and issues and discontent.